Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem. Welcome to Hebrew Perspectives. So glad that you're here with us today. And we are glad to be back. A little family time, a little holiday time. We spent time with Pesach, with Passover, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of memories. And we're so glad to be here today again, finally back live and in person. Shabbat Shalom. Now, tonight we count the Omer 12, day 12 tonight. Just a reminder for those of you that are new, I've noticed that there's a lot of new folks that have come onto the Hebrew Perspectives page on Facebook. And what we do here is we follow the same Torah readings that the Messiah and his Talmudim, his disciples, did. That's the same reading pattern that originated with Moses through King David, resurrected again by Ezra and Nehemiah, and like I said, followed to a T on a regular basis with the special holiday readings and everything. All of that, that's what we do. We follow that same pattern. Why do we do that? Because we're reading a Hebrew book. I was telling somebody just a couple of days ago, asking what we believe, and I said, well, if we are believing in a Hebrew Bible, a book that's written that we're way over here in America, and it's a culture that's way over on the other side of the sea and a little bit further east. People totally different than what we are. We're over here in America. We're very Greek, very Roman. That's just the way it is. And so now what? So basically, what we're doing is we're reading a Hebrew book. We're reading a Jewish book. We're reading the book about Israel. Israel. There's so much emphasis on Israel right now. Everyone's looking to Israel. Yes, everyone should be looking to Israel in everything they do.
Yes.
In the Bible reading, in the Hebrew heroes that we follow, and in the Hebrew Messiah that we serve. So with that, we do a Torah study each week. And then Torah, for most people know nowadays that Torah means instruction. But what a lot of people seem to forget is that Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. That means that's all of it, from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Deuteronomy. That's all the Torah, every bit of it. Many people just think that the Torah is just like the 10 Commandments, and no, that's not the case. It involves a lot more than that. It involves, as a matter of fact, we read just recently, not that long ago, that God gave to Moses the written instructions, and he gave him the oral interpretation of those so that Moses knew what to do and how to do those things. For so many of us, we read the Bible and we just look at it on the surface, and many people dismiss a lot of things because they don't understand, they don't know how it was performed or what was done. So it's just easier to just dismiss things. Well, that's not what we do here. We dig in, we look at Torah, we go in the depth of meaning of it, we look into how to apply it to our lives, because the Torah is life, and that is what we're talking about here today. The Torah is life. Our Torah portion today is ACHAREI MOT, which means after the death in Hebrew. Again, like I said, remember tonight we count 12 on the Omer counter. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, there's another interesting thing here is that in the half Torah portion from this week is Ezekiel 22, 1 through 19, and it correlates with our Torah portion. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's begin with the blessing, and we'll dive right in and get going. All right. So blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Please, Adonai, our God, sweeten the words of Torah in our mouth and in the mouth of your people, the family of Israel. May we and our offspring and the offspring of your people, the house of Israel, all of us know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who selected us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. And as the blessing says, may Torah study always be sweet to you. So now, ACHAREI MOT, after the death. Before we get into that, I'd like to share. Oftentimes, my wife and I, we follow Living Each Day, Rabbi Twersky's devotional, and sometimes I like to share it on this broadcast. And today we'll do that. It always comes. He usually does. You just pick some things, like something from the prayers and something from the sages, something from the scripture. Today it's something from the prayer and something from the sages, or whenever you hear the word chazal in Hebrew, that's talking about the sages as collectively all the sages from basically from before the time of the Messiah, which a lot of the Talmudic references come from. Again, they were written later on, but the point is that they were oral at first. So from our prayers, tranquility and joy, a brightness for the Jewish nation, a day of rest, a day of pleasantness. Those who observe it and commemorate it thereby testify that in 6 days God created the universe. Now, I gotta fly. Yeah. That's why they're called bugs, because they bug you. Now, Shabbat, a testimony to the creation of the universe. The message of creation is twofold. Firstly, the universe was brought into creation for a purpose. In a purposeful universe, man can have a goal and a purpose to achieve, and life can have meaning. Secondly, the divine process of creation came to an end on the 6th day. By Shabbat, God completed his work. For on the 7th day, God rested from all his work, and that he had created to be done, in Genesis 2 and 3. Where God's work ends, man's work begins. We are partners with him in creation, correct? Right. If life has no purpose, then everything is futile, and there can be no joy. Without a reason for existence, the anxiety of living in a meaningless world would be overwhelming. Joy and tranquility can be only with Shabbat. This is why we observe Shabbat. Not, for one, it's a commandment forever, and two, it's a joyous time.
Yes, it is.
It's a time of freedom and tranquility, and a time to study Torah and be with family and congregate and come together and love one another and love God and do all these things. And that's the wondrous part about it. Now, from the sages, from the Chazal, all of a person's earnings are preordained from one Rosh Hashanah to the following Rosh Hashanah. This comes from Beitza 16a. A man complained to the Rabbi Meir of Premishlan that someone opened a competitive business near him, and he was fearful that his earnings would suffer. Rabbi Meir told him that when a horse drinks from water from a river, he thumps with his hoof. Do you know why he does this? Rabbi Meir asked. Because when he sees his reflection in the water, he thinks there is another horse there, and he tries to frighten him away, lest the other horse drink all the water and not leave enough for him. The horse does not have enough sense to understand that there is ample water in the river. But as a human being, you should understand that competition will not diminish your income. Whatever you are destined to earn, you will earn. how different our lives would be if we did not exhaust ourselves trying to increase our earnings, and believe that while it is our responsibility to work to earn our sustenance, there is nothing we can say nor do to alter whatever was decreed for us, and no one will take from us that which is meant for us. I like this whole thing. I like that part about basically the horse basically seeing a mirror image of himself, and you'll see why this is kind of interesting as I get further on into this. Now, again, we're in ACHAREI MOT, after the death. This is after the death of Aaron's two sons. The Tanakh, the Torah, is laid out in a kind of a different chronological order than what some people get confused by it. But again, further deeper study and then studying of the sages, you realize how things all fit together, why things are the way they are, and why, like I said before, the half Torah portion fits right in with what we're talking about later on in this portion. And so pardon me while I take a little sip of water. When you do a lot of talking, the mouth starts to dry out. So let's get into it. All right. So somebody sent me a book called The Journey to Self. It has some insights into the Torah portions, and I found some interesting things. And today we're talking about the Torah being life. Now, what we have in our life is we have this desire to want to do something. Most oftentimes we do things for ourselves. The world suffers a lot of this. Really, it's called narcissism. Basically, they're concerned about only what affects them, and I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it here, but it's pretty much a sad existence when you're only living for yourself. It has to be about living for others as well. I'm not saying that you can't live for yourself. It's more about a balance in our life. We struggle in life with the how to do things. So, like I said, everybody wants to contribute something that's significant to the world. Everyone wants to play a meaningful part in life. So many people want to be the conductor of the symphony, but most of us are playing in a part in the symphony. You may be, first, second, third chair, and some may have an understanding this. I have a good friend, Steve Gerber, who he's performed symphonies, conducted, written, done all this stuff. It's just amazing man. And he could tell you a whole lot more about it. It reminds me of something. It's like, do you go to, somebody, for help on something that doesn't know anything about the subject? Of course not. I'll tell you right now, we don't know everything that there is to know about Torah, but we do look at the right resources. We do look for where we can find the answers to the questions that we have. And we're always asking questions. We need to be asking questions. We need to be a people that asks questions, that thinks critically, that opens up the book and starts asking questions. Why is this? What is the purpose? What is going on here? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Those are questions that need to be asked when we are studying the Torah. Now, so as I was saying, this desire that we have, it's deep within us. It's a part of our life. It's what we do. We want to go beyond who just we are, our own existence. We want to do that. And so again, a lot of times, people want is through ego, people want fame, I mean, just think about it. There's a show called The American Idol. I mean, what's an idol? It's something that basically people want to be worshipped for standing up and singing. Now, do they really think that way? Maybe not necessarily, but the point is that that's inherently is a it's deep within us. It's there. It's a yearning that we want to do. So we want something greater for ourselves. And what happens is we have this question, and here the question in life is not whether we wish to accomplish something significant with our gift of life. The question is how. Okay,
Right.
that's again here when we look at the life of a believer. And I've mentioned this before, and for those of you that are new, maybe you are new in your walk with God. Maybe you've discovered Yeshua, and you don't know quite where to go from there. Well, this is where we start to work on character development, and I'll speak a little bit more about this. So how can I become more self-aware, and how can I become more disciplined? How can I become more caring? And how can I be more successful? Yeah, this sometimes the world seems to frown upon people that are trying to succeed at something. And there's so much jealousy and so much narcissism and so much nihilism in the world. It's just it holds everything back. So let's talk about this Torah portion here. We have Aaron, and in the beginning of this Torah portion, we are again in ACHAREI MOT, and uh, let me set that there. And let me get back to, I had turned a couple pages. All right, so let me read just a little bit of the beginning of it here. And so Adonai spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's two sons when they approached before Adonai and they died. And Adonai said to Moses, speak to Aaron your brother. He shall not come at all times into the sanctuary within the curtain in front of the cover that is upon the ark, so that he should not die. For in a cloud will I appear upon the ark cover. With this shall Aaron come into the sanctuary with a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for an elevation offering. He shall don a sacred linen tunic, linen breeches shall be upon his flesh. And it continues to go on. What's interesting is that why in the world would he was basically, don't go in there anytime you want. And this is probably, notice this comes right after the death of his two sons. And basically what happened there is there's all kinds of speculation, and different rabbis have different opinions as to what happened. But for the most part, they went when they shouldn't.
Right.
And basically, this is now, here's God's warning. Speak to Aaron and tell him, don't just show up anytime that you want. Now, people look at that veil and they see it as a barrier, as in now the Messiah, and it was rent in two, and now we have access to boldly go into the throne of God. Uh, yeah, be real careful. It's kind of like the whole consuming fire thing.
Yeah.
You want God to be a consuming fire? You know what consuming does? It consumes we are flesh and blood.
Right.
If you want to meet your maker, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they had gotten something from a company called something with heaven in the name. And I said, if you want your company to be successful, just put heaven in the name of your company. Like ammunition heaven. You know, hey, would you like to meet your maker? Come on down to ammunition heaven. And but anyway, but the point is that it's that veil was a protection.
Right.
It wasn't a barrier. It was a protection. And this is one of those misnomers, one of those under people that misunderstand that a little bit. And it's basically, it was for the protection. It was for protection. And so that's what it comes down to. So now let's talk about Aaron here a little bit. All right. So Aaron's service in Hebrew is avodah. We perform service of the heart. That that's something that we are working on in our life when we are serving God with our whole heart. You shall love the Lord your God, ba'ahavta, you shall love with your whole heart, right? Whole mind, soul, strength, everything, right? All right. So this avodah that ACHAREI MOT is describing, ACHAREI means after, MOT is death. And it's describing what the divine service is for the Kohen Gadol, the high priest known as Aaron. And this particular one this portion, this has to do with Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, as you read on, if you were reading and following along in the aliyah each day, and for those of you that are new, you'll notice that there is a picture with the words in there that describe it's just listing off commandments, because we go through the commandments each year. And if anybody has any questions, they can ask about those commandments and we'll answer those. And then you'll notice that the readings there are for each day, what that aliyah is for. As in other words, when, like in Luke 4:16, when it says the Messiah went up to read, he made aliyah. He went up to read. So basically what's going on there. So you read that aliyah, and you'll find that I forget where I was going. Okay. Oh, so Yom Kippur. All right. So basically, as you're reading, I was saying what you're reading in these readings, you'll find that all of a sudden you get to the part where it's talking about Yom Kippur and it describes the service and everything that's happens and how it's supposed to be done. Then it says that it is an eternal decree. I don't know, but the last time I looked up the word of eternal, it meant forever. And you know what? Then if you have any doubts about the word forever, I looked that up and it meant eternal. So it's like it doesn't go away.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't go away. And so many people, especially in Christianity, they look and they see Yom Kippur and they're like, why do we study Yom Kippur then? Or why would we be involved in that? As because Yeshua is our sacrifice, he is our atonement. Yes, it's true, and that is on a whole community level. All right, but what happens here is, where was I going with this? So Yom Kippur, why would we celebrate it? Is because it is known as the celebration of new covenant or renewed covenant. Why is it called that? Because on the very day that Yom Kippur is, guess what happened? The sin of the golden calf. What happened during that? Well, we know that story, but let me jump to just some of the details on it. So Moses throws the tablets down. Actually, according to the sages, the words that were written on these sapphire tablets from the throne of God, carved out of the throne of God, were light, and Moses was able to carry these tablets. Think about that. How many people? Moses was what? He was 80. Beyond that, how old? He was up there, right?
Right.
He was up there quite a ways, and so he had the words were light. And so what happens is when the sin happened, when we sinned at the golden calf, those words became heavy, and he had but no choice but to throw the tablets down. Maybe he would hurt himself. But the biggest point here is that Moses intervenes. God gives the attributes of mercy. Oh, now you talk about grace. People say there's no grace in the Old Testament. There's no grace in the Hebrew Bible. Well, there's some grace right there and beyond.
Right.
Giving 13 attributes of mercy. And now, what does God say? He says, now, Moses, you carve out 2 tablets, and I will write the same words. I will write out a new covenant. It's the same words.
Right.
But the words new covenant. Okay. When we read in the Chumash, when we read in our Tanakh, when we read in here in the Torah, we find that that's a new covenant. So now you see, because of the sin, now the Torah did not cause them to sin. did not cause us to sin. Sin caused us to sin. Okay? And contrary to what some people you may hear is like, the Torah killed 3,000 people that day. I don't know. That's just insane. Okay? It was the sin. And here's another interesting part about it. You may not have heard this before. But the sages, when you look in there, it will basically what happened. Moses had been gone for more than 40 days. They miscalculated on the calendar as to what day he was supposed to return. And next thing you know, they're got their own calendar in their mind. And the Satan, cursed be he, confuses some people with a vision, and they send a vision of Moses being dead and in a casket. This causes the people to, you read on where it says, where is this man Moses? You know, we need new leadership, basically. And then that's how the whole process just ends up falling right into one of the most major idolatrous things to ever happen. Now I want you to remember something, that this Torah, the physical Torah of the tablets, had not been given yet. That's because, think about this. Let's go back to the Garden of Eden, when basically God had to remove them when they ate, because so they wouldn't eat from the tree of life and be stuck that way forever. So now you have this incident happening with the sin of the golden calf. This marriage contract was coming down. Then what would God be married to? Wouldn't be married to a chaste bride, would he? No, the process of teshuvah had to happen. The process of returning to God had to happen.
That's right.
So now you see why this is so important. It's why would we remember Yom Kippur? Why would we have anything to do with it? It's because it's renewed covenant. When the Messiah says, I have not come to destroy the law, but I've come to fulfill, he was coming to renew. He says, I bring you a new covenant. He wasn't changing anything.
Right.
He wasn't changing anything. He was doing the same thing.
Right.
What was the state of Israel at the time when he entered the scene? Well, let's dig this a little bit further, because we can go to Ezekiel, our half portion, Ezekiel 22, 1 through 19, and you'll start reading all the list of things that they were doing, that God said, I'm going to spew you out of the land. And when you look here toward the end of our Torah portion, it is basically the same list of things that God says not to do. You know, don't consume, let's see here. It's basically, he's coming under forbidden relationships. God warns him to carry out the laws and decrees, and then starts going into things talking about not uncovering people's nakedness and lying with beasts. And people don't like to read this stuff.
Right.
And it's understandably. But this is what the state of Israel had fallen into. And it was back here, God warned, he says, because that's what the nation that was there before you was doing.
Right.
Don't do what they were doing. We are a called out people that do not need to be doing what the nations are doing.
Right.
We don't need to be following their festivals and doing their sin and following their idols and doing all these things. No, 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 no. So Aaron, when we read here, it says, so it's interesting what we're reading about here. Aaron, he is commanded to do a sacrifice for himself and then for the people. And you may think, wow, that's not very, it seems like it's kind of, he's taking care of himself and then, hey, now let's take care of the people. Seems kind of odd. Again, these are questions that we ask. Some people may not see this, some people do. You know, it's like, so why does Aaron take care of his own atonement? That's another thing. Just an aside here, atonement happens throughout the Bible. Sometimes it's with blood and sometimes it's not. Think about this. So there's so many instances where people are forgiven in the Bible, their sin is atoned for, but there wasn't a blood sacrifice. Again, eh, people came to the temple because of and they had unintentional sins that they needed to take care of. They made a mistake. They missed the mark. They missed the Torah. They wanted to come back in line, and that makes sense. So let's continue on. So what we have here then is a difference between a couple of things. One is chayecha kodmin, and the other is va'ahavta la reacha kamocha. And basically, let's talk about these a little bit. So I was talked about the sages before, and in the Gemara is part of the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Gemara, and the sages are having a discussion, and they're talking about two men stranded in a desert with a single flask of water between them. This makes me thirsty reading about it. Single flask of water between them belonging to one of the two men. If the owner of the flask drinks the water, he can survive long enough to make it safely back to civilization. If the men split the water, they will both die. The initial opinion, as quoted in the Gemara, is that the owner of the flask must share his water. This opinion stood until Rabbi Akiva came along and contested it, arguing that chayecha kodmin, that means, in the Hebrew means, your life comes first. Your life comes first, okay? And then, so therefore, that means that the owner of the flask, he's the one that he must save his own life at the expense of his friends. And it seems kind of harsh, doesn't it? I remember listening to Rabbi Kraft one day. He was talking about how they had gone into an expedition with a bunch of people out on a tour, and then part of the tour went way out into the desert. And they had IDF soldiers with them to protect them. And for some odd reason, the IDF soldiers had forgot to bring water for some reason. And so somebody had to be sent back. Well, this is interesting because this story, it's funny how these things happen in real life. But wouldn't you know it, there was one person that had a flask of water. And everyone was going to be able to partake a little bit of the water. But before they did so, it was everyone just take just a small little drink and then pass it on. But and Rabbi Kraft describes this as your desire would be to quench your thirst, to survive, because you don't know what's going to happen. And he took a little sip and he passed it on. But there was people that were just wanting to guzzle it, and some tried, and then somebody had to step in and pass it along, But it's an interesting thing. So Rabbi Akiva's statement on this, on Chayech Chodmin, your life comes first. This seems somewhat logical here, but he also says something that seems to contradict his very own statement, and it's a very well-known statement that he says, and it's also found. Guess where? The Messiah says it. God says it. It's just it's a very common theme throughout a lot of people, but some Rabbi Akiva decided it was one of those things that he used it a lot. He said it a lot, and he said, "Va'ahavta le raecha kamoka ze klal kado ba Torah," which means love your friend as you love yourself. This is a foundational principle in the Torah. Okay, so now if this statement is true, and if it truly did represent Rabbi Akiva's view, then how can he say Chayecha Kodmin? Remember what Chayecha Kodmin means? Your life comes first. Contradictory statements, aren't they? So, as with most other things, people just kind of dismiss, though, and they, I don't know, just move on to something else. But basically what it means is, how can you prioritize your own life? Is this not a contradiction to loving your friend as yourself? Well, okay, so there's a two-step progress that we need to talk about here. Another thing I thought it was is there was this concept. I can't remember where the article was from, but I found this article that was talking about how um, actually sharing wasn't necessarily the right way to go. When you're talking about a couple of kids and they have a toy, basically it's better for you to teach your child to wait their turn, because it's detrimental to the whole sharing process.
Yeah.
And it seems out of the norm to do that. It's like, you need to share. It's like,
Give it to him.
really? I said that same concept is leaked into much of our politics in the world today, but I won't go there. But we're going to go to a two-step process. You're welcome. Two-step process. So in order to understand what Rabbi Akiva's seemingly contradiction seems to be talking about here, is that as well as we look at Aaron's korbanot, his offering, and so we have to look at the concept of giving even more. Now, looking at giving, all right. Now, before you go running off because you think I'm going to ask you for money, which we never really do here, that's not what we're talking. That's not what we're talking about. Giving can involve money, but it involves so much more than that. There's so much greater depth to it. So there is a fundamental prerequisite for giving, that we must have something to give in order to give. All right. In order to contribute in this world, we must first build something worth contributing. That's part of what we're trying to do here. My wife, she took one look at all the books surrounding me this morning. She's like, you need a whole nother room. Why? Because I'm trying to do something here. I'm trying to build something, build a library, learn so that I can share. This is what we want to do. Now, so if we are really going to truly love another person, we must first love ourselves. Okay? Now, the thing is about the Torah is about life. Many, like again, I said before, many people have you thinking that it's all about death. But now I've shared this before, but remember the words that were engraved on the tablets? The word engraved means freedom. So cherut, and that can mean freedom. And so the Torah brings freedom. The Torah brings life. That's what it's all about. So when we're truly loving another, we have to love ourselves. And again, I said some people, they kind of frown on that, making that not look like. But the first step is to build internally into our lives, to develop our own skills, develop our own gifts. It's important that we do. We have to strengthen our minds. We have to develop our beliefs. We have to have our convictions.
Right.
We have to have our understanding of God, and we definitely have to have an understanding of Torah. That's part of our daily prayers, is asking for understanding. Asking for understanding. At the same time, we have to develop our midot, our character traits. Our character traits. Again, it's another one of these things that we end up missing out on a lot because, again, those of you that are new, we work on character traits. We work on ourselves in order that we can do these things. We work on our personality. This is where our personality comes from. This is what makes me a funny rabbi. We work on our self-discipline.
Right.
We want to craft it, this ideal. We want to craft it into a lifestyle.
That's right.
That's where a lot of believers run into a problem is, how do I make this into a lifestyle? And the reason why we do this is because we need to maximize our potential in this world. We are contributing to this world. Remember, that's the giving that we're talking about, giving ourselves. Only after we do these things, then is it possible that we expand outward, that we are able to contribute to the community. I remember, when I first encountered God, one of the first things that what I wanted to do was I felt an immediate desire to share. And at the time I didn't know anything at all. Well, I mean, I knew some things, but with the Spirit of God helping me, circumcising my heart, helping me along, then it took some time for me to discover that I needed to work on my character as well.
Sure.
So what happens when giving isn't giving? Let me go back to this two-step process. Remember, a mom and a kid are on a plane, and all of a sudden the masks drop down. There's a problem. The pilot comes on, instructs everyone, the stewardesses, let's get the masks on. We've got a problem here. Cabin pressure drop, whatever it may be. The instructions are to put your mask on first before you can help anybody else.
Really good.
That's important.
Yes, it is.
Life-giving air, breath, Torah, Ruach. There's so much to this. I told my whole work group at work on Monday. I conducted the meeting, and I was basically telling you, I said, sometimes frustration comes along. You're trying to do your job, things aren't going right. Stop for a moment and take a deep breath.
Yes.
Remember, God breathed life into the first man, and we've been breathing that life ever since.
Yes.
In through the nose, out through the mouth. Take some time to take some deep breaths, get that life going back in you again.
Yes.
Now, part of our process of character refinement, another thing is my wife and I, we did this book last year, 48 Ways to Wisdom. We're doing it again this year. What it is basically each day as we're leading up to Shavuot, we're counting the Omer. We're also learning how to refine our character. We're learning how to work on our character traits. This is one of these things that is a process of what we need to do. We are climbing the stairs, going up, making aliyah, reading daily,
yes,
doing these things on a regular basis. So when giving isn't giving, another thing it was interesting is that just yesterday in this book, we read on acquiring yourself a teacher.
Yes.
That's one of the things that we need to do. It's kind of odd, but when I first became a believer, it was kind of interesting because somebody was assigned to me to teach me a Bible study, and they never got around to it. And no fault of their own. They were, there's life gets in the way, but everyone has to have a teacher.
That's right.
You have to have somebody, in some cases, which is very rare, you may know more than your teacher, but you still have to have somebody that makes you a little bit accountable in life, that can tell you, hey, no, we need to do this.
Right.
We need to go in this direction. So many people have this great desire to give, but they don't have anything to contribute. I always think of a lot of times you have these people that some people have the idea, but then when you say, okay, well, then you go ahead and put that into place. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. And that it just comes down to they just wanted to complain. But it's a wonderful thing to dream of giving $1 million. But if we don't have it, that desire doesn't have much effect. So it's admirable to want to be a role model, to be a teacher.
Right.
But if we don't possess the knowledge,
Right.
if we don't have the character traits that can be emulated, I have a sticker right here on my computer that says Torah scholars increase peace in the world. That was said by Rabbi Hanina. Aaron, the first high priest, was a peacemaker.
Mhm.
These are things that we need to emulate.
Mhm.
So what good is that desire if I don't have traits that can be emulated?
Right.
I would hope that people would look at me and they would say, I can learn from this man, and I can see that his, character traits, that these things that he's doing, I hope I'm doing something that can be emulated.
Right.
Of course, this desire that we have, it's praiseworthy, and it may lead to someday to something extraordinary. But right now, at this point in time, it's not having an effect. We still have to build it within ourselves.
Right.
The same thing goes for married folks. All right? Marriage can only be as great as each individual spouse is. The beauty of marriage is the result of what each spouse invests and contributes into the relationship. We were listening to something recently, and I found it pretty interesting. Rabbi Wolf, yes, and he was talking about Adam and Eve. And what was interesting about it is that he said Adam knew Eve, and he was like, "Why is it written this way?
Right.
Was God trying to spare our ears with some kind of PG version?" She said, "No, we all know what's going on there. We all know what it means when Adam knew Eve. That was a good thing. It was a wonderful thing, and it still is, But the point is it had to do with knowledge.
Right.
Their knowledge coming together and becoming one.
Yes.
Being single in mind and purpose. And that's what a marriage relationship is all about.
Right.
Is coming an ideal marriage. In an ideal marriage, each spouse expands outwardly by giving of themselves and giving fully into the relationship. But what happens though sometimes is neither spouse has anything to give. And what kind of marriage ends up happening there? Well, again, with the way we have the world today, so many people are narcissistic, thinking of themselves.
Conflict.
They get into a marriage, becomes conflict. They're not giving in order, to produce. It ends up failing. That's why the divorce rate is so high.
Yep.
So let's talk again about this chayech kodmin and how this is a prerequisite. Oh my goodness, we're 48 minutes in already. I'm gonna have to go longer. I'm sorry, folks. Let's shed some light on Rabbi Akiva and his talking about this chayech kodmin. It's not a contradiction to va'ahavta la'reach kamoka, or love your friend as you love yourself. Only if we first invest in ourselves can we expand outwards in order to give to others. Only when we embrace our true self, and discover our potential can we truly fall in love with ourselves. It is only after we love ourselves that we can expand outwards and love someone else. Now, chayecha kodmin is the first step to fulfilling va'ahavta le'arecha kamoka. So when we invest ourselves is the most selfless form of selfishness. Now, what is meant by this as, it becomes the very foundation of what we're trying to do, and it's the prerequisite for giving. So many people have self-esteem problems today, and they run rampant, and they can't look at themselves. They have trouble with themselves. And what to compound the problem, we've left our institutions to teach our young people today, and they're getting it wrong. I'm sorry, but they're getting it wrong.
That's true.
Now, this selfless form of selfishness, deep down, we want something for ourselves in serving others. We really do. Please take care of your heart. I want you to eat better. I want you to do this. I want you to eat. Why? Because I want you around.
Yes.
It's me. I want you around. But it also, I want you to be healthy.
Right.
I want you to study Torah and learn and grow and then contribute to others and grow.
Yeah.
If you like what you're hearing here, remember to like and share and subscribe. Help us grow.
Yeah. That's it.
So that brings us to human growth. My grandsons, Cohen and Corbin, they're twins. And I'm always joking and say, hey, do you guys know you get the same clothes on? We are influenced by things around us. When human growth happens, it's mostly from the outside in. Okay. So people look around at their friends, they look at their family, they look at society, and then they shape themselves to fit those surroundings.
True.
Hence you have, those two boys are, they're young, their mom puts the same clothes on them, but where's that influence comes from? It's an outside influence that basically says twins are supposed to wear the same clothes.
They're gone.
And they're fun. I love it. They're great. I love them kids. So the clothes that they wear, the food that people eat, the things that they talk about, they all reflect our external environment.
Right.
In this model that I'm talking about here, you're just a slab of clay. And the goal in life is to fit neatly as possible into all of the other molds that society is creating for them. This is why it's so important for young minds like that. Their minds, you put as much good things as you can into the young minds, because at a certain age, their minds become jello. It sets. And then you got, little, you see the jello when somebody throws stuff into it, and then you got all these different things in there, like here's a hockey stick and a gumball, and that's not what I want in the jello. You know what I'm saying? Not that jello is kosher, but this is just an example. I think you can find kosher jello. But anyway, so this model that we're talking about this in the world today, that couldn't be any further from the ideal. This outside, working from the outside in, it doesn't work that way. Each one of us has been created with our own unique potential.
Yes.
And it's in us. It's waiting to happen.
It's a spark.
It's a spark within us, waiting to happen. I was just telling my wife, I said, for every one person that there's a spark of something in them, there's 10 people that are having ignition trouble. But anyway, it's a car joke. I don't want to have to explain these jokes, people. Our job in life is to discover who we really are, to express our dormant perfection. Oh boy, that word perfection, that's a word that scares people. But do you realize that perfection is right in line with Torah? Be perfect, for I am perfect. What does that mean? It means following the commandments. Just because you can't follow, okay, let me tread carefully here. People will say things like, I can't follow all those commandments.
Say it all the time.
It's impossible to do it. No, it's not. When God says be perfect, he's basically saying, follow the commandments.
Yes.
That's why he robed himself in flesh and showed us that it can be done.
That's why understanding and education is so important.
Pulling us back to where we need to be.
Yeah.
Torah centered, following the commandments of God. Remember, it's a renewed covenant. All right. So, and it's frowned on when people are basically you're trying to uncover yourself. It's being made looking at to, I think they use the word humanism, as in that's being away from God. That's when you're taking care of yourself. That's not what it's talking about. We are created in the image of God. Okay, growth is about isn't about becoming great. It's about becoming you. Growth is about becoming you. Learning isn't about discovery. What are you talking about? No, it's about self-discovery.
Sure.
Where do I fit in the scheme of things?
Yes.
You are born in the image of God. You're a masterpiece, but you're masked by confusion, and society doesn't help that at all. Your job in this world is, again, to uncover yourself.
Right.
The world is throwing things at you and weighing you down, trying to get you to assimilate to it.
Sure.
Trying to get you to follow their ways, follow their festivals, follow their commandments, follow their ways, follow their idols, follow their calendars. Heard an interesting story, and I was relating it to my wife. There's a midrash somewhere, and I meant to look it up. But basically, some folks tried to leave Egypt before Moses led the people out. It was a group of Ephraimites, and one person got a vision. There again, there's this whole vision thing. People getting visions, and basically he said the calendar's wrong. We should be leaving now. So this one man convinced a bunch of Ephraimites to leave and go out, and they were immediately slaughtered by the Philistines, and their bones lied in the desert. The same bones that Ezekiel came along, and God said, can these bones live? Scary to try to follow your own calendar. You know, it's interesting. So basically, this just a side thing for the calendar thing is that somebody told me the other day, and they're like, it was that Hillel guy that did the calendar thing and messed everything up. So they're basically trying to say one man. Well, historical fact shows that it wasn't one man. He may have been the leader of the Sanhedrin at that time, but all the other ones would have had to have agreed.
Right.
Not one man can do it. The Sanhedrin had to do it. All right. And so it was the Sanhedrin that fixed the calendar. So where were we? We were, see here. Okay. So let's talk about, remember what I was reading on Tversky, but the horse seeing itself in the water. Instead of becoming a mirror, which reflects everything outside itself, we can become projectors. We can build something majestic and beautiful within ourselves, and we can express that out into the world.
Yes.
Or we can just look into the water and see ourselves and think it's someone else, like the horse did, and try to firmly hold our ground and scare away other people. No. It's kind of like a thermostat or a thermometer. What does a thermometer do? You put it in your mouth, it takes your internal temperature. But what does a thermostat do? It controls the outward temperature. It's an inside mechanism that controls the outside temperature. That's what we want to be. We want to be more like thermostats. So a true model of growth is where we first develop ourselves internally, and then we express it out into the world. Makes sense, doesn't it? All right. So let's get back to Aaron. Aaron, his role as a leader. So we can explain what's going on here behind Aaron's avodah, behind his service. A leader who has to be the ultimate example of working from the inside out. First, he has to develop himself internally, and then he can expand outwards, right? Before Aaron can serve the community of Israel, he first had to work on his own personal connection with God. And what I find interesting, really, really interesting, is because this happens right after the loss of his two sons. And it wasn't that far away from his failure at the golden calf. But again, he was a Torah scholar in his own mind, in his own right, and he was a peacemaker. These were character traits, these were midot that he worked on. And God saw that. He said, who greater than someone like Aaron, who fell so hard and rose back up through teshuvah, could lead these people in the service of God? He was a peacemaker. So only after bringing his sacrifice, his korban, for his own personal atonement, was Aaron then able to expand outwards. Then he was able to help all of Israel with their connection with God. My wife just said I have 1 hour to go. No. So, an ageless principle. I'm trying to finish up. Really, I am. So, when we think about focusing inward and when we are investing in ourselves and in our growth, we tend to think about young people. We tend to think about teens and people in their early 20s. People are still in finding their careers, choosing their investments. They're focused on their learning. They're investing in themselves as much as possible. This is one of those things that I really wished I would have done as a young person. I really wished I would have invested more time. But I'm now. Yes, I'm doing it now. I'm investing so much more. As a matter of fact, I find myself investing more than I am contributing. But that's, because you get this late stage in life, you're like, well, what can I do? Right. And so basically, I have to spend more time on it. Yeah, I'm even getting mastery in my biblical Hebrew. I want to have mastery in it. I can speak Hebrew, but I'm going to university because I want to master it. I want to be even better at what I'm doing. That's right. It's like, you think about it now, you're just like, you put money into retirement now at my age, it's not going to have much of effect. But I'll tell you what, right now, investing in Torah, investing in studying the language, doing these things, that it exponentially is so much better and has an effect, an immediate effect. An immediate effect it has. So let me finish here. So basically what we're doing is it's never too late to grow. All right. And it's never too early. It's also never too early to contribute. Somebody God gives insights to people in order to be to contribute. So the valuable skill is knowing how to create that ideal balance. We talk about balance here. God is a God of weights and measures. Balance between the two, of knowing when to shift the balance one way to the other. When do I invest? When do I contribute? So what I want to finish here with this today is I want us to be inspired. Yes. I want us to be inspired to endlessly invest in ourselves, also while realizing that everything that we invest into ourselves can ultimately be contributed into we. Yes. We. Love yourself as you love your friend. Yes. May the Lord bless you and keep you. pardon me, guard you. May the Lord shine his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. May God turn his countenance toward you and grant you shalom, peace. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Baruch Hashem Adonai. Baruch Hashem.